tight with a as a 1 hour session closing at 7:30, because I know a lot of people have got an evening ahead of them, so intrude on that. And this is very much about the strategy that we published finally a couple of weeks ago, and we'll go into a little bit of detail on that, but also particularly about the sort of member engagement and which has already started. But I'm very keen that this is a strategy for all of us, and that we're all involved in it. So I'm going to just start with a few introductions. Obviously, I'm Dominic McGonigal, I'm the chair of Snowsport England, and we've got most of the board present, and plus Claire, plus Jade. So Simon, do you want to a quick intro?
Yep, sure. Hi, I'm Simon Levine. I suppose I got involved in Snowsport being a ski dad for about a decade, helping run a club, volunteering at races. I've been a non-exec director looking after the finance portfolio for about the last 5 years. I'm down to my last year of our 2 3-year terms that I can do, so I'll have to be stepping down, unfortunately, next year. And like I say, I look after the finance portfolio as well as the risk area. And finance, by its nature, tends to get involved in most things, so I tend to be involved in lots of different parts of Snowsport England.
Excellent. Morwenna?
Hi everyone, good evening. I'm Morwenna Angove. I joined at the same time as Simon, so I will be starting my final year on the board from June. Lovely to see so many of you here this evening. I, together with Simon and Greg, were fairly instrumental in the strategy that you've seen and you want to ask questions about tonight. So you've got a few experts on the board. At the moment, though, I'm working predominantly with Jade and her team on communication, and soon with Claire on the people plan for the organisation.
Excellent. And Gareth?
Evening, everybody. I think a lot of the names that I can see in front of me know me, but I'm non-exec member of the board. I'm a member of the Alpine Committee. I've had a son that's raced from the age of 5 to 21. Still going. I was the ambassador's team manager. I'm a level 4 coach, part of the Bormio team that go out every year and enjoy this fun out there. And general glutton for punishment really is probably my edict.
Excellent. Andy?
Good evening, everybody. I'm Andy Howell, non-executive director on the board, and I'm the appointed safeguarding and welfare champion. A lawyer by trade. Worked in sports law for a number of years now. Day job is in golf as head of integrity and regulation. Worked in horse racing before then, heavily on the safeguarding side of the industry. Work streams that I'm working on here at Snowsport England are safeguarding, obviously, and general code of conduct and welfare issues, also the alternative income revenue streams. I look forward to serving you all. During my time on the board, I've only been on the board for 6 months. I hope to meet you all sometime soon.
And Greg?
Hello, everyone. Really lovely to be here and seeing you all this evening. My name is Greg Sturge, Independent Non-Executive Director. I've just started my 2nd term on the board. And like Morwenna says, that makes me one of the longest serving members on the board at this stage, and did a lot of work shaping the strategy. In terms of the background and skills I bring to the role, I started out in frontline sport development and events, and then moved on to work in Sport England's core market team, and now head up a sports technology company in the UK. And in terms of the work streams I'm working on, very much helping with the strategy side of things, and then directly supporting Jade with the ongoing Sport England work and submission, as well as a lot of work around the diversity and equality initiatives that we're working on as well. And I sit on the EDI group that we have between the board and staff to deliver on that. So working on a few things, and it's great to be here this evening.
Thanks. Claire?
Hi, so I'm Claire. I'm sure I've spoken with many of you. I've been with the organisation for just over 8 years now. My role is managing the operational side of the organisation and leading on governance.
And Jade?
Evening, everyone. I've met most of you now, which is great, but I've been here since October. My role is participation manager, and it's about bringing the participation strand of the strategy to life. And then I also sit on the senior leadership team with Claire as well. I'm going to talk a bit more about kind of what my team are up to in a little bit, so I'll leave it there for now.
Thank you. So the strategy we developed strategy actually last year, and as Morwenna and Simon were saying, there was a lot of work went into that. How we would work with Sport England, how we would serve the membership, and how to develop on all the three strands: leadership, participation, and talent. And in producing that strategy and then starting to implement it, it did show a need for change to deliver for the members and for the wider sport with Sport England. We've just done a member survey, and thanks very much for completing that. But that does show that we've still got low engagement with members. There's still, our working relationship with stakeholders needs to improve. I'd say we still have a slightly disjointed sort of board, staff, and committee structure in terms of sort of the working together. I think there's a lot we can do there. And then just recently we had, the whole Apex issue exposed the gaps in our talent pathway, the competition entry system, which don't need to tell you, is sort of launched without actually consulting the clubs and the users. And I think we've got more to do on the safeguarding and the code of conduct. I think we've been too passive in that area. So we are making, I'd say we're making good progress on the participation and the talent side, and others will talk to that soon. But we were falling behind in leadership, and hence the recent leadership change. And this really is all about working with the membership as a co-owned strategy. This is not just something that the staff do, or the committees do, or that the board does, or even all three. When we get everybody really working together, it's actually a strategy for the entire sector. And I think that's one of the things that excited Sport England about it, that we had this vision, and we're delivering on that. So we're just going to focus briefly on some of the work streams. We've got several work streams that have kicked off recently and are delivering on some elements of the strategy. And what we'll do is focus on the ones that are of particular interest to the membership. So obviously our membership is very tilted towards Alpine, although do remember that we are responsible for freestyle and Nordic, and there's a lot of work going on in those two areas as well. But I think for this session, it's probably best to concentrate primarily on the sort of the membership side. And this is very much part of an ongoing conversation. We had an open session in Bormio, which was an extremely good way of sort of connecting with the academies and those athletes and parents out there. We've had I had a recent session with the committee and regions chairs. We had a session with the coaches and the academies. We've got tonight, which is another opportunity to continue the conversation, obviously the members survey, and then we have our AGM in a couple of weeks as well. So this is very much part of the ongoing conversation, and I'm very keen that we continue that we actually work more collaboratively as a sector. So that's where we are in terms of the sort of leadership and the strategy that we're pursuing. And just want to ask a couple of people just to go into a little bit more detail on some of the areas that are most interest to the members. So, I mean, Simon, can you just give us a quick heads up on the sort of the new revenue streams, which is obviously a key part of the strategy.
Sure, no problem. And this is kind of stealing bits of my own thunder from the AGM that's going to be in a couple of weeks' time. But just putting into context from a financial perspective, every year within Snowsport England, we do a budget working with the discipline and the other committees to understand where we're going to look to target in the following year. And then one of the exercises we do as a board is extrapolate that out into a multi-year forecast. Now, we're in a situation at the moment where we have agreed a 5-year grant period, which we're finished year 1 of with Sport England. We've got talent funding for a couple of years. And as we look at that, that income has been fixed before we had huge increases in the cost of living, so high inflation rates. So we've got a large element of our income is fixed for the next 5 years, but costs are accelerating much more than anyone ever predicted when that happened. So understandably, our forecasts show a increase in deficit situation as we go into the future years. And each year we look at how we're going to address that. One way to address that is to increase our income from other sources. So we have income coming from our grant from Sport England and other similar grants. We have income from membership fees and affiliations. We have event income, but we need to look at other sources of income as well. And sponsorship and other commercial forms of income are things we traditionally look at. Now, if we take sponsorship first, that's always been very difficult, especially in the current economy. Sponsorship it's not really out there, but we don't actually have a very good proposition for sponsorship as Snowsport England. We have a much better proposition for sponsorship if we combine Snowsport England and GBS going together to talk to people, because then you're showing grassroots through to the ultimate elite athlete. So one of the things we're thinking about doing or working on is talking to GBS about, do we go to look at sponsorship opportunities together and do more collaboration in that area? Other things we're looking at, we're wanting to take what we've learned from Alpine and that club structure and maybe expand that kind of membership structure through to Nordic and freestyle, so we can increase the number of members within Snowsport England from those disciplines as well, because they're very underrepresentative as members of Snowsport England. So looking at that, we're looking at some different technologies that could bring more people into the knowledge of Snowsport England and actually offer value-added opportunities for them. So one of the things we did a few weeks ago was we had a workshop with a consultant that was paid for by Sport England, went through a whole list of ideas that we put forward through the team and through the group of non-executive director volunteers. And we've kind of shortlisted some of those that we're then kind of looking at further and seeing how we address and bring them into fruition. But I think going forward, commercial income opportunities are going to be more important to both cover potential future funding gaps, but also to help us grow as we implement the 10-year strategy. So that gives a bit of an overview. Hopefully that's enough for the moment.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you very much, Simon. And then Jay, do you want to just give us a little bit more detail on the sort of Club Connect work and the participation and that the diversity work as well that we're doing?
Yeah, of course. So in the last 6 months, there's been some really exciting work taking place across the team. So we've got 3 people that sit with my team. We've got Steph, our participation officer, Ryan, our education and coaching lead, and Kevin, who's our comms and digital engagement lead. In terms of clubs, we have opened SE Club Connect, which has been really about just connecting clubs and Snowsport England together, but to support clubs to be able to grow, develop, do what they need to do in the best way possible. We've had some really engaged sessions. We've also recently ran some disability specific sessions, and I know some of you guys that are here today have been on those calls. We've got another one next week. We've also done a club survey, which was really well engaged. I think we had almost 8% now of clubs completed that. And we're currently working through what that looks like and implementing some changes based on that as well, just to support structures of clubs really specifically to what the needs are. And that's going to kind of grow a 5-year plan as well. The other really exciting big project that fits a little bit across what Simon's talking about as well, because it will generate some income into the organisation, but we're looking at reinvigorating our coaching courses. So Ryan's doing a huge amount of work on that, and that will really support our clubs, because it will make our courses more relevant and accessible, and it will be an online learning system that will allow us to grow our education, not just from coaching, but to officials, and across different volunteer groups as well. So I saw a taster of that last week, and it's, you know, again, a really long-term plan, but it's starting to look really exciting. In terms of EDI, as Greg mentioned earlier, we've got an EDI working group. Internally, we are starting with that as what EDI looks like across our organisation before we start to build that out. But there's a lot that we can do in that space, and that's a really key part of what we've been funded for from Sport England. So we have to really put some priority in that space. The core things so far, we're going to have a diversity inclusion action plan, which needs to be published by next February. So we're working through the content of that. And again, that will be a 10-year plan that will align with the strategy to make sure that we are having an impact in that space. We're also looking at our data, and our data is really key to being able to feed our EDI strategy. So looking at improving the ways in which we collect data, the data that we understand, and the data that we hold as well. So for example, at the moment, we've got really good data around disability and gender in terms of an EDI space, so an equality, diversity, inclusion space. But some of those wider demographics we don't quite understand of our membership, but also the wider sport. So a lot's happening in that space to really understand where we are so that we can continue to grow it. And one of the core things that launched last week is our Community Innovation Fund. So we do have, I think Kendall are on the call today, but we had 3 clubs that engaged with that last year, and we are looking at growing that next year, which is all about trailblazing ideas to engage more people in the sport in a different way, testing out different ways to enable inclusivity. Hopefully that's a quick whistle-stop tour, but any questions, just pop them in the chat, and happy to pick up at the end or pick up the phone and give me a call.
No, it's great. Thanks very much, Jade, and thanks for all you're doing with the clubs. It's much appreciated. And then Gareth, can you just give us a little bit on the talent pathway? That's an important work stream for us. Just finding the mute button.
Apologies, I wasn't expecting you to come to me next, so you caught me on the hop with the unmute mute button. Yeah, talent is a challenge. We said at Bormio that we need to look at this. The more we look at this, I'll be blunt, I'm not as corporate as my colleagues, so I sort of say as it is. It's a bit of a mess, to be perfectly blunt. And what we've had to do is really go, rip it right back to sort of first principles. There's so much, you've got the young person putting the skis on for the first time at the age of 4 or 5, right the way through to, let's call it a Dave Riding World Cup skier. But then you've also got almost a side talent pathway as well, where you've got disability, you've got people of a more mature age. I'm trying to pick my words carefully now, which we need to take into account as well. So what we're doing at the moment is trying to put together, and we are putting together, and hopefully by the end of this month, we're in a place that we can actually get a flow chart, which actually shows the talent pathway from literally the first moment you put the skis on to, let's say World Cup. But then there's almost a parallel, and there's so many intersections when you start looking at this, and it's something that I've been looking at with Tom for a couple of months now. There's so many interlaps, intersections that make it quite complicated. I'd love to put a lovely straight flow chart together that actually shows everybody what it is. But we're getting there. And the intention is that we as a board will have a draft in place in terms of a flow chart by the end of the month. We will hopefully sign it off a couple of weeks later. What we then will do, we'll talk to the academies, the clubs, get some feedback from them to make sure that we're on the right path, because there's no point us doing this on our own. With the greatest respect, we know a certain amount, but we don't know the detail. The clubs and academies know the detail, and we need to get them to come into that arena with us. So that's really important. So the intention, as I said in Bormio, for those that were there and were willing to listen to my ramblings, is that by September, by the start of the new Alpine season, we will have a flow chart that will actually everybody can buy into. That is the talent pathway. What we then need to do is knit around that is the skin on the flow chart. So we know the step by step by step. This is where you can go if you want to go, and people have different aspirations. And it might be money, it may be financially led. I'm going to stay as a dry slope racer, and that's absolutely fine. I might want to go from dry slope into alpine. That's a different route. I might want to start for alpine and stay in alpine. Yeah, there's so many different intersections in all of this that we need to be mindful of, and it's very, very difficult, as I can vouch for, trying to put this all together. But what we will do is get the flowchart together, get the substance together, and then what we need to do is put the meat on the bone. Now, there'll be some things there that we can do, and there'll be easy fixes. There'll be some things that we can't do, or we could do with a bit of investment or a bit of input from our coaches, from academies, from clubs, etc. And we're also mindful, very mindful, that people have different aspirations. There'll be some athletes that want to go all the way through and want to go through GB, Snowsport England, GBS. I want to become a Europa Cup skier or above. That's fine, and that's one route. There's going to be a lot of people that actually set their aspirations. I just want to be a Snowsport England skier and be in the Alpine, be in the Snowsport England Alpine Club. There's so many different aspects depending on who they are, what their drivers are, and I'll be blunt, what they can afford as well, which sounds an awful thing to say, but that's the reality of life. So we need to cater for all these people. There's going to be disability athletes. There's going to be, I've sat there at a start race with athletes that are of 70 years plus, and they're fantastic. And we need to be mindful of their talent as well. So it's a huge globe that I've got to try and cover here. But we're getting there. We're not far off the mark. But what I would say is that we are going to try and put some real tight controls into, those that know me, Toby went through, my son went through various racing elements. What we want to do is make sure that every element that we offer is substantiated with something that is meaningful. It's not just a name, it's not just a title, it's not just a club for the sake of it. It means something. So if you're in the GBS route, absolutely fine. There's probably more relevance around that. But if you're in the Snowsport England Alpine Club, what does that mean? What do you get from it? And it's about putting that meat on the bone, which is really, really important for us. Because if it doesn't add value, why is it there? Should it be there, and should we add value to it? So it's a balancing act. In terms of various elements, what we want to do is make sure it's elitist is the wrong word, but we still want to make sure that people aspire to get to somewhere. And I've been through this with the ambassadors and the dry slope. They're the best of the best. We want the best of the best for all our athletes, and we want those that, please bear with me with my language, but those that aren't quite the best of the best to aspire to be the best of the best. So we need to make a pathway that they can do that, and that's really, really important. That it's not just if you get this score or you get this race or you happen to be really good, then one day that you get this ticket. We've got to get the balance right, and we've got to make sure that there is a proper pathway to aspire to be the best in whatever you're doing, whether it be dry slope, whether it be alpine, whether it be Nordic, whatever it is, you're aspiring to be absolutely the best we possibly can be. What we want to do is say, end of this month, we want to get something out of the board. We'll send that out to various committees in terms of the academies and the clubs to give us that sort of reassurance that we're heading in the right direction. And I'm sure they'll be the first to tell us that we're not. And then the idea is that by September, which is slightly earlier in terms of the alpine season, we get something out that is recognised and understood by everybody. Don't get me wrong, this will be the skeleton with a little bit of meat on the bone, but a little bit like the safeguarding, it will always be work in progress. There's always going to be something that we're going to top and tail, and that's where, I'll be honest, we're probably going to have to come to the academies and the clubs and say, look, can you help us here? Can you help us with the training? Can you help us with the coaching? Can you help us with the venues? Whatever it is, we want to make sure that we filter these athletes through to be the best they can possibly be and give them the opportunity they can possibly be. So,
Great.
That's me.
Thanks, Gareth. And I think it's fair to say that we've had a lot of support from the coaches, which is absolutely invaluable on that one. Then Andy, can you say something about safeguarding? That's such a key thing, and again, that's another area where the academies have been very, very supportive.
Yeah, of course. Hello again, everyone. Look, just a personal observation, really. to begin with, having come in only 6 months ago. And having been at different organisations before here, it's refreshing to see that even coming in, safeguarding was an absolute commitment of the board. It was already a standing item on board agendas. And just beyond that, generally promoting a positive culture within the sport, which obviously safeguarding's such a key part of. You need expertise within an organisation to do that. I've joined with background in safeguarding and legal, but the board already has good safeguarding experience through Dominic, Gareth, and others. And only last week, I think it was last week, we had our safeguarding training, so a top up of our own safeguarding training from the CPSU. I think the point I'm trying to make is safeguarding is everybody's responsibility, isn't it? So whether you're operational or not, it's for us all to be vigilant on the subject. It's not just about clubs and academies, it's for everybody. And we need to engage, we need to be aware of the issues that are out there. And I'm speaking for the board because that's my experience, but I'm sure that goes to every part of the sport and the organisation. But operationally, we've brought in Mark Vaughan, who joined us recently as the safeguarding lead. He's come in with a vast amount of experience from law enforcement and safeguarding in other sports, and in a short space of time, I feel he's made a huge impact. I think we've made good giant strides forward. He's proposed, had it approved, and is now implementing a safeguarding action plan. And that includes various actions, surprisingly, to ensure that we are progressing and that we are moving forward. And just to pick a few out, there's an audit process that he's proposing and that's due to go live with some pilot clubs willing to volunteer. He's implemented this in another sport previously. It's tried and tested. It's been a huge success in the other sport, and it's designed to ensure a consistent standard of safeguarding throughout the sport. So this audit, every single affiliated club and academy will be audited, and the audit will be looking at things such as policies in place, record keeping, promoting safeguarding, codes of conduct, risk assessments, information in the right places, with evidence to support, not just on the say-so of the club or academy. It has to be supported so that we know that they are in place and that it's genuine. And that'll take time to complete. Mark set himself some ambitious timeframes to get through all of the clubs and academies, but that's the starting point, if you like, for this consistent standard of safeguarding throughout our sport. But look, the key to this is it's not about catching people out. It's not about catching clubs and academies out. It's about working together. It's about engagement. It's about offering guidance. It's about offering support. Let's not lose sight of what we're trying to achieve through safeguarding. The aim is to improve the standard of safeguarding. We want a safer sport for everybody involved in it. The flip side is that there has to be compliance. To people who don't want to comply with that process, it is mandatory, but also to ensure that standards remain high between audits, if you like. And all those things are being contemplated as part of this audit process. But aside from the audit process, that the key thing is that increasing information, increasing awareness amongst our sport and working together. So, for example, the website's a key resource area, and Mark's working to revamp the website so that good material exists, but that material is accessible, that it's user-friendly, that reporting is easier to do, that the reporting form on the website is easy to find, that, as Mark says, it's 2 clicks away, to ensure that people know how to report, and it's an easy process to accomplish. Policies are already in place, as I say, but they're continuously being reviewed because safeguarding evolves, and so we have to evolve with it. We're very aware of that fact. There's a case management system in place. The case management system's there to record information and to record intelligence that comes through to Mark in his capacity as the safeguarding lead. A piece of information alone is quite isolated. It might mean absolutely nothing, but if you bring information together, it creates a much bigger picture. And this system allows us to interrogate data and to store data in a meaningful way, rather than just in emails or in folders on the computer. Training is obviously an essential part of the whole safeguarding function. But most importantly of all, safeguarding needs to be visible. People need to know how to report issues. People need to know how things are dealt with. People need to be supported. Information needs to be exchanged between key stakeholders, internal and external. This all ties into, is what I said at the very start, a positive culture. A positive culture, you know, breeds happy participants throughout, and a good safeguarding process. Mark's under the scrutiny of the board. We're all under the scrutiny at Snowsport England of the CPSU. They audit us annually on what we're doing in this space. CPSU, the Child Protection Safeguarding Unit. So look, we're going to keep making encouraging steps forward. We're going to keep implementing Mark's safeguarding action plan, and we'll keep you posted on the progress. But I suppose the important thing to end with is, if there is information out there, then contact Mark. The reporting forms on the website, or contact welfare@sportengland.org.uk, because if we don't have the information, we can't do much about it. But let's work together.
That's great. Thank you, Andy. So that's just some of the work streams going through at the moment, but we've sort of focused on the ones that we think are of most interest to the membership. Now we've got some questions. If you've got any questions, please just pop them on the chat. We've already got 3 questions, which are all from Stephen. Thank you very much, Stephen Metheringham. So we'll go through those. We've also got some questions from people signing up for the event, so we'll go through those first. I'll try and sort of group them so that we can kind of make sense of them. So let's start off with Brian Thomas has asked about the consultation. About time members given the opportunity to be consulted. Thanks. And maybe this should have been done before announcing the strategy. We want more than fancy words. What exactly are the key actions and objectives? Greg, can you sort of just give us a little bit of insight into that?
Yeah, of course. Firstly, I think it's really important to say that there were consultation opportunities throughout the writing of the strategy. The board was very aware of that throughout. You can't write a strategy without engaging the sport to make sure it's meeting their needs and their expectations. So I know there were sessions across directly in person at Bormio. We had sessions with academies, sessions with the various committees that are obviously set up to represent the bodies and the clubs that sit beneath them. We had sessions with the regional chairs, and there are a couple of opportunities around AGMs over the last couple of years as well. So we certainly feel we have given sort of every opportunity for individuals to engage with that process as the strategy evolved. In terms of the key actions, I would hesitate to go back over what's already been covered so far this session. I hope that gives a flavour of some of the priorities. I think the 3 pillars themselves are pretty clear. In leadership, it is about the changes we've been making at a leadership level that we believe are positive changes that will be driving forward new work and new areas across the business. Individuals such as Jade and Kevin and everyone that's coming to the business over the last year have really picked up the reins and are driving forward activity on all fronts, and that's really, really exciting to see. We have obviously got a lot of work going on with Sport England. So our first year review was submitted today to them, and we'll be having a review session with them in the coming weeks. And there's a real focus here obviously around comms and transparency as well, and that's why we're here today, is as a board and as an organisation, as a staff body, wanting to be transparent and make sure that you can hold us accountable and we can tell you what we're doing, and making sure that that's all aligned and we're all pulling in the same direction. And the final thing I mentioned there is also the annual satisfaction survey, which has obviously gone out over the last week or so as well, and I know we've had a great response rate to that. On the participation side, diversity inclusion has already been touched on, massive focus at the moment, and the Innovation Fund has gone live for its 2nd iteration this week. I think we learned a lot from the first iteration that went out last year, and we're really looking forward to developing that further. And there's a lot of work going on the coaching side as well, around the coaching courses that we're offering, the e-learning opportunities that we're able to expand into. So there's a huge amount of activity going on there. And then on the talent side, as Gareth said, really stripping it back and understanding where we're at, so that we can come at that with fresh eyes and not rebuild it, but make sure we understand what we're working with and then build it out from there and improve the metrics that we're using across the board. So I won't go into any more on that at this stage, unless there's sort of particular questions on any of those areas that have already been raised. And obviously we do have the AGM coming up as well, where again we will dive a little bit deeper into some of the areas of work that are going on. So I hope that covers off that question.
Great. No, thanks, Craig. Then we've got two questions about how this affects the membership and how it affects the club. So Stuart Robertson, you asked, what effect will the strategy and restructure have on the general membership? And then John Briers, you asked, I'm interested in the 10-year strategy, its purpose, direction and delivery for grassroots sports clubs such as ours at Kendal, and how it supports us all. I think, Gareth, you're our member director, so you're probably best placed to respond to those.
I suppose if I'm blunt, Stuart, I don't think there's going to be much change at all. Only positive change. I don't think. If you look at what we're trying to do, and Greg's outlined it very, quite perfectly. This is moving from where we were to a different place and a different level, and I think that's really, really important. I don't think there's going to be any adverse effect on our membership in any way. I'd like to think that our membership is available to talk to myself. That's my role. Chris obviously he's on his way out and couldn't be here tonight, unfortunately. But myself and another whoever that will be, we're here to listen. We're here to talk. We're here to listen. We're here to try and implement, and that's really important. I can't see an adverse effect. I mean, if there is, tell me by all means, and we'll do something about it. This is about communication, and I was the first. I've been around in Snowsport about 15 years or so. I was the first to criticise. And I've sort of stuck my head above the parapet to say, right, okay, I'm going to jump from one side of the brick wall to the other side of the brick wall and see what it feels like. And it's not the best. But in doing so, I can appreciate where I was and where we are. Communication has not been the best. When I said that at Bormio, for those that were there, we need to improve. I genuinely think we are improving. But communication in any business, you can always say it could always be better. It could always be better, and that's something that we are working on. It never will be the best, but it will be better than it was the month before, or the 6 months before, or the year before, and that's what's really important. Pick up the phone, send us a text, send us an email, whether it's to individuals on the board or whether it's to Jade or the people at Snowsport England. And we will do something. We will react, and we will, give us an honest answer. If you don't like, I'm not promising that the answer you receive is to your liking, but at least it's an answer, and then we can then take the next step and move forward.
Thanks. Actually, it's worth adding on that point that all the work that Jade is doing on the Club Connect, which is absolutely about serving the membership. Then we've Alan Jones, there's quite a long question, so if you don't mind, I'll sort of paraphrase it. It's really about what are we doing about facilities? And I think Morwenna, could you take that? You're a bit of an expert on facilities.
Well, I used to be. So Alan, there's a lot of questions in your note. So I hope it's okay that we just talk about facilities, because obviously you've asked about pathways, which I think Gareth might have answered, but if not, perhaps pick up with us afterwards. And to your point about vision coming first in the document, yes, good point. It's certainly further ahead in the annual report. So just talking about facilities. So I know that because we've had a number of conversations over the years about this, and I know that you feel that the organisation should do more to facilitate growth of facilities around England. And you may recall that last year, Tim and I worked on a document which was a mapping of all the facilities in England, looking at the average drive time. And yes, there are gaps. So the average drive time to most facilities is no more than 1 hour, but there are gaps in Cornwall. There are gaps in Swindon, where obviously a site was planned. There are gaps in parts of East Anglia, which obviously a site was planned there. and there's a further gap in the northeast, and a site was planned there. And none of those sites have opened for financial reasons. All of the sites had private investors who've since withdrawn, and I believe all the sites had council interest and possible money, most of which has been withdrawn. So I think there are, particularly at the moment with the economic situation and the price of electricity, there are fairly good reasons why certainly indoor snow is not being looked at as an option by anybody, let alone the governing body. However, we have been, I would say, in the past, guilty of not optimizing what we can do with facilities. And to that end, as part of the participation strand, Jade and Ryan are working with both facilities and clubs to see what more we can do to bring that network together with Snowsport England. It's very early days, but watch this space in terms of progress, because I think there's going to be some exciting work there. Just to pick up very briefly on a couple of your other points, one was to do with older people participating in snow sports. If you look around at some of our clubs, some of our facilities, indoor snow in particular, they do offer a number of options for the over 50s. I can speak for hours about Chill Factory, but they've got an over 50s group there that is over 120 people now. So there are opportunities out there for people who wish to participate in the sport when they're a bit older. And to your point about facilities and ethnic diversity, Jade touched on briefly in her summary, the need for us to get a bit more data, and in all likelihood initially our focus is going to be on gender and the disability market rather than ethnic diversity at this stage, but it is very early days. So I hope very quickly I've managed to answer most, if not all, of your questions, but please do come back if I haven't. Thank you.
Thanks. Then we've got 3 questions about Tim's departure. So one is concerned about continuity, and can you give me from Headley, and something about the thinking. Lisa was asking about that it was very sudden, it was a shock to many. And then David, you were asking about this in relation to the 10-year plan. I mean, I think we've obviously covered a few of these things, but I think, you know, I do want to go on the record and saying, you know, Tim's given a huge amount to the sport. You know, we've thanked him as a board for that. You know, but he was, you know, with us for a long time, and as I was saying earlier, the strategy did highlight a need for change, particularly the sort of leadership on the leadership side. And you know, whenever these happen, is always going to be a shock, I think, to people who are, you know, particularly people who've been close to Tim for a number of years. Obviously, you'll understand that in these situations, it's the discussions are highly confidential, and it's not appropriate to release any information until those discussions have been concluded. And we did that obviously with Tim a couple of weeks ago. We do have a handover in place. Tim is available to us for the next few weeks to help the handover, and he's already been helpful, for instance, in the Sport England report, and we do have new line management in place, so that the team and specifically Jade and Claire will report directly to the board through me. So we do have things in place, and you know, just as a reassurance, Greg was telling you about the report to Sport England, our first annual report, which I think is a very strong response, and we're you know, we're picking up the threads and all the others, and it basically means sorry, moving ahead with the strategy, particularly on the leadership side. Then we have a question from Stephen Methering, can I take your first one, Stephen, which is what measures are being put in place to check clubs who are affiliated are compliant with all the safeguarding, and then you've added in specific reference to Apex 2100. Andy, you're our sort of safeguarding lead. Would you mind just taking that one?
Of course, yeah. Hello again. Look, outlined the audit process earlier. I think that has to be the starting point. It's the starting point and key to bring in standards to a certain level. There's got to be that initial check on compliance and the ability to rectify any issues. And I really want to stress that that's about engaging and helping for the good of what we all want, and that's a consistent and a high level of safeguarding. And it's clubs and academies aren't going to have perfect systems from the outset. We realize that at this stage, but our goal and Mark's aim is there to counter that and to achieve the goal of improving safeguarding standards. But I think the question is getting at something else a little bit, and I think there's two parts to the answer. People have to comply with that process. Self-reporting saying that, yeah, you have all these safeguarding procedures in place doesn't really work, does it? So there's a process there to comply with, and it has to be evidence-based. And we trust that people will engage with that process. I don't see any reason why anybody wouldn't, on the basis of common goal, common interest, and all that kind of thing. But it's about doing what's reasonable to assist in that process, because obviously there's a limit of time that we're willing to give to get people to a certain standard, because there's a big risk element with safeguarding sat there in the background if standards are below expectations. And so that in terms of compliance, that's when you'd have to turn to the disciplinary procedures, if you like. We can compel, it is mandatory to engage with this process. The disciplinary procedure says that grounds for disciplinary action includes an act, conduct, or other matter which puts a child at risk or harm. Now, look, we aren't there. We've never had this example, but that would be an extreme example of when non-compliance, or if standards dipped below what was expected, would head. But on an ongoing basis as well. So let's say that the club or academy engages, but over a period of time between audits, their standards slip below what's expected. We realise, I think, speaking for Mark, I know Mark's not here, but I think he'd agree with me saying there has to be some kind of continual checks, there has to be some kind of compliance provisions in between, and whether that's random checks, the possibility of random checks, or whether that's an annual review meeting. I mean, in horse racing, we used to put each stable, if you like, into a risk banding, which meant that they were more susceptible to on-the-spot visits and compliance checks. They're the kind of things that can be implemented as part of the audit process to encourage, if you like, ongoing compliance. And obviously, if something ever happened, if there was a report or malpractice, then that would result in a review of the standards at the club or academy, naturally, which again can result in the disciplinary process, which is sat there at the end. But yeah, I think I want to emphasize, help, engage, let's get everybody up to that standard, let's work together. But at the very other side of it, you've got the codes, the rules and the regulations, and in between, compliance checks along the way.
Thanks. And Stephen, you got two more questions on the chat, which we'll come to. And Ian, you seem to have started a question on the communication issue, and then that's where it ends. But
I think it was answered, so I
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. But if there are any other questions, please pop them in. And we've got a couple more that came in advance. So I'll just go through those first. Simon, there's one for you on the funding and the finance, which is from Phil Hart. How is the leadership change cost justified, and how is the strategy going to be funded?
Sure. I'm off mute, aren't I? Yes. So from a cost of removing the incumbent CEO. Basically, there are a lot of statutory provisions as to what a person gets paid when they leave an organisation in these circumstances. So the vast majority of the cost involved was statutory. I think, how do we justify it? I think if you don't have the willingness to make change in leadership happen or change in anybody happen, and we did quite a bit of change, if you remember last year as well, we changed a substantial amount of the team because we wanted it to be refreshed, to be more dynamic, to help us implement the strategy and develop the strategy. If you're not willing to make those kind of changes, you're never going to have accountability. And one thing this organization has always demanded is accountability. Now, we all sit on the board, we're all volunteers, we are the same as you, volunteering, you run clubs or whatever else you might do, the officials, whatever, we're just volunteers, we sit on the board. We are accountable as board members to you guys. Everybody, even the CEO, is accountable. And if you're not willing to make those changes, you can never have that accountability. So how do you justify the cost? Well, accountability is one. If you have a strategy that requires a change, then you've got to be willing to make that change. Otherwise, you're going to be ticking along the same way forever. And as I mentioned, most of that cost is statutory requirement. In terms of the tenure strategy, mentioned before, we've got a 5-year grant agreed with Sport England that runs from 2022 to 2027. That's for just under £1.1 million over that period. And actually, if I can address also Stephen's question 3, kind of comes under this. He asked about talent funding. When we spoke at the previous AGM, we had a tick over 50,000 talent fund given to us by Sport England. We were working on the further or longer term talent funding. We were awarded £100,000 per year talent fund through to fit in with the next Olympic cycle. So that's a 2-year period, I believe. So that's £100,000 on top of the overall Sport England grant. So hopefully that addresses Stephen's other issue. And these things will help. We're on the premise from Sport England about us having a strategy that supports the unifying the movement strategy, which is the Sport England strategy. And that fits very well with what we're trying to do with inspiring snow sports in our strategy. And I think that, along with membership and affiliation company income, event income, and the commercial income we talked about earlier, those are the methods by which we'll be funding the 10-year strategy.
Okay, thank you. And then we've got a question from Andy Orsel about the desire to promote talent. Are there plans for next season to have an Alpine squad? How do we get under 16s that compete well internationally to continue into U18 and U21? Gareth, I think that's your patch.
Sorry, can you just run that again? Sorry, my computer just died.
Yes, of course, yeah. So are there any plans next season to make the Snowsport England Alpine squad a central part of this vision? How do we get under 16s that compete well internationally to continue that into U18 and U21?
Yeah, this fills into my ramblings earlier about the whole talent process. I'll be blunt, and I touched on it earlier. It's got to add value. There's no point having all these little teams that are there because you can wear the shirt. We want the best talent to push forward, but we also need to balance that off with the best talent that are happy with the level that they're at. There are some athletes that are never going to, ability-wise, or they're just not going to want to go to the GBS level. Some athletes are going to want to go to that level. Some athletes are going to just want to stay at an Alpine squad level, whatever it is. We need to get that balance. So that's really important, and that's part of the whole talent pathway. And that's going back to what I said about getting a draft out in June, and then we can talk to the academies and clubs to make sure that we haven't missed anything. We'll take some feedback from there. If we need to top and tail some bits and pieces, then we'll do so. But this is a personal thing, and it may come out. What I don't want to do is just have lots and lots of people going for lots and lots of clubs that really don't mean anything. It's got to mean something. And I hope the athletes feel that as well. You know, if I was an athlete, I'd like to think it actually means something. If I achieved, you know, if I was a member of X club or Y club or A club, I've earned it on merit. And that's what we've got to instill in this process, that there's some, you know, the individual has worked their what's-its off to get to a level, and they've achieved something, whatever level that is, GBS level, Snowsport England level, club level, regional level. Everybody has their own aspiration, and it's making sure that we get that level of aspiration right for the athletes, and we give them those opportunity. What I don't want to do is just provide loads of opportunity that it doesn't really mean anything, if I'm honest. And that would be a failure, if you like, on my part. And I don't want to do that. I want to make sure that it's meaningful and people get some value out of it. It's not just a case of I've got there, I can pick up a t-shirt, and that might sound a little bit blunt to some people, but you know, it's meaningful. Get there, pick up the t-shirt, and what next? You know, and that's the level I want to try and get to.
Sorry, as this sorry, Steve Metheringham, I'm not going to have a go at you, Gareth. I think it's great and everything else, but as this is an open forum, we do think that we've gone from having, and I'm going to dominate the Alpine thing, and apologies to everybody else, but I do think that we go from employing or bringing somebody in like Julian, and we have a philosophy where it's an inverted funnel, and we're going to bring people in and we're going to push people forward. He goes because he gets fed up, and I've had many an hour conversation with him. We're now in a position that clubs have no idea how to tell people what is the format going forward. And you've got kids that are in it 1 year, and then they move into the next year, and they're not in it, but they're in it again the year after. This is not long term. We need to think about their mental. We give all this, and I speak like you, Gareth. We give all this crap about all mental health and following mental things, and we're great supporters of things like the Ellie Souter Foundation and everything else, but we're not helping our kids.
No,
Stephen, you're absolutely right, and that's why the talent pathway is so critical.
But it's not there. It's not there, and it's never.
I noticed, yeah. But Gareth.
Well, hang on. Let me jump in. Steve, you're absolutely right. I've known you long enough. When I picked it,
I'm a spade guy.
Yeah, well, you and me both. So we've known each other long enough, and we can duel occasionally. Look, it is where it is at the moment. It was a bit of a mess, and I've got the benefit of Toby going through it, for those of you who know me, and it was awful. And that's what I'm doing my best to try and level this out and actually get into a format that we can give people the certainty. What I want to do, this flow chart I keep talking about, it's from putting your skis on to World Cup, but then there's obviously things along the side as well that go. Give people that and you can jump on or jump off wherever you want, because not everybody want to become a Dave Ryder. Let's put it like that.
We're getting close to time, but thanks for that, Steve, because that's absolutely crucial. Just got two little questions to mop up. One is from Nigel Greenfield, saying that we're hiding behind confidentiality, which actually we're not. All I was saying was that while we were in discussions with Tim, obviously that is confidential. But once we made the announcement, we've been totally open about it, and that's what this has been about, and what other discussions are about. And then there's one other question from you, Stephen, about the DBS administrator, and that's simply a vacancy because the previous DBS administrators resigned, so we're recruiting a new one. We are literally coming up to 7:30, and I did promise everybody that we wouldn't encroach too much on the meeting. Thank you all very much for joining us. I hope that's been encouraging and interesting. And please, I'll repeat what I said at the beginning. This is our strategy. This is our sport. For all of us, and please work with us, input on whatever work streams you are particularly interesting to you, and we'll probably see you at the AGM in a couple of weeks' time. So thank you all very much, and have a good evening.